Margaret returned home with the herbal concoction but had made a fateful decision. She laced the medicine with a deadly poison. That night, she handed the cup to Grace with a forced smile. Richard was a kind-hearted man with a successful farming business in Greenwood, a serene town known for its fertile lands and close-knit community. She fell in love with Grace, a beautiful and gentle woman with a heart of gold. Grace was known for her humility and kindness, always helping her neighbors and treating everyone with respect. Their wedding was the talk of the town. Friends and families gathered to celebrate the union of two beautiful souls. Richard and Grace's love for each other was evident, and everyone prayed for their happiness. They built a modest home filled with laughter and dreams of raising a family together. Years passed, but their dream of having children remained unfulfilled. Despite their deep love for each other, Grace couldn't conceive. She visited countless doctors and herbalists, tried various treatments, and prayed endlessly, but nothing seemed to work. Grace stood by her side, reassuring her that their love was enough. However, pressure from his family began to grow. His parents wanted grandchildren to carry on the family's name, and whispers from the community grew louder. Grace felt the weight of guilt, but Richard reminded her that she was his first love and nothing could change that. After much deliberation and encouragement from his family, Richard decided to take a second wife with the consent of his wife, Margaret. Margaret was a younger and a beautiful girl that came from a neighboring town. Unlike Grace, Margaret was bold and outspoken, with a fiery personality. Grace, with her kind heart, welcomed Margaret into their home with opened arms. Margaret quickly conceived, and soon the house was filled with cries and laughter of children. She gave birth to 2 sons in quick succession, bringing joy to Richard and the family. Grace, though childless, loved the children as if they were her own. She became their second mother, teaching them songs, cooking for them, and telling them bedtime stories. The 2 wives lived harmoniously for years, or so it seemed. Grace found joy in helping to raise the children, and the household seemed to flourish. Richard loved both women, but his affection for Grace remained deep and unwavering. Margaret began to notice this and felt uneasy. One day, Grace fell ill. She experienced severe nausea and dizziness. Richard rushed her to the local clinic, worried about her health. After routine tests, the doctor delivered a shocking news. Grace was pregnant. Grace was so happy. She was so happy. The husband, Richard, was so happy, but was glad that after, her first wife could give her a child again. The family erupted in joy. Richard couldn't contain his excitement, and the neighbors joined in the celebration. Even the community, who had always pitied Grace for her childlessness, began rejoicing at the miracle. Grace's eyes sparkled with happiness as she felt the baby growing inside her. However, Margaret's heart darkened. She was sad. was jealous. She said in her mind, I won't allow this woman take the love and affection my husband has for me. Why did God even give her a child? I must do something about it. She feared that Grace's pregnancy would shift Richard's love and attention entirely to her. The jealousy that had been brewing within Margaret began to consume her. She thought of various ways to kill her. A few weeks later, Grace began feeling unwell again. She developed a fever and Richard summoned the doctor. The doctor prescribed some herbal medicines and instructed Richard to collect it from the hospital. However, due to an emergency, Richard sent Margaret to pick up the medicine. Margaret in her heart was glad. She was happy. This is the right time to do the needful. I need to get rid of this woman. Take her away from the lives of my children and my husband. I must do something about this. Margaret returned home with a herbal concoction, but had made a fateful decision. She laced the medicine with a deadly poison. That night, she handed the cup to Grace with a forced smile. Trusting Margaret, Grace drank it. Moments later, Grace clutched her stomach in pain. She screamed, blood rushing out from her mouth. Margaret stood up, looked at her and laughed. You think you can take away my husband and children from me? This is your last day on earth. You are going away from our lives, from the life of my husband and my children. She left the door and bashed. She closed the door and went out. Grace continued screaming. Immediately, Richard and the children rushed in to her side, but it was too late. Grace took her last breath, leaving the household in chaos and grief. The news of Grace's sudden death spread quickly. The once joyful household turned into a place of mourning. Neighbors, family, and passerbys gathered, shocked by the tragedy. The community youth summoned the doctor who had prescribed the medicine, accusing him of negligence. To prove his innocence, the doctor sipped the same medicine he had prescribed. To everyone's horror and surprise, he collapsed and died instantly. The crowd erupted in confusion and anger. If the doctor wasn't guilty, who could have done such a thing? Who is the mastermind behind this tragedy? An elderly man in the community asked if anyone else had handled the medicine. All eyes turned to Margaret. Panic-stricken, Margaret began packing her belongings, hoping to flee. But the community youth caught her before she could escape. They dragged her to the village square, where she was confronted by the elders. At first, Margaret denied any wrongdoing, but under intense pressure, she broke down and confessed. Those tears, she admitted to poisoning the medicine out of jealousy. She couldn't bear the thought of Grace taking all of Richard's love and attention. The crowd was stunned. Margaret's action had not only cost Grace her life, but also the life of the unborn child and that of the doctor. Margaret was handed over to the authorities and sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. Richard was devastated. He couldn't comprehend how someone he had trusted could commit such a heinous crime. He mourned Grace deeply, often visiting her grave and talking to her as if she could hear him. The community too mourned the loss of Grace, a woman who had shown kindness and love to everyone she met. Margaret's children were taken in by Richard's sister, who raised them away from the shadows of their mother's crime. Richard never remarried. He dedicated his life to charity, building a clinic in Grace's memory to provide free medical care to the community. The story of Grace, Margaret, and Richard became a cautionary tale in Greenwood. It reminded everyone of the destructive power of jealousy and the importance of love, trust, and kindness. Richard often told his children stories about Grace, ensuring her legacy lived on. Though his heart remained broken, he found solace in knowing that Grace's love and kindness had left an indelible mark on the world. Some beautiful moral lessons we should learn from this story. 1. Jealousy is very destructive. Jealousy can ruin relationships, families, and even lives. Margaret's envy of Grace led to irreversible consequences that destroyed her family and her own future. Love should be built on trust and fairness. True love thrives on trust and fairness. Richard loved Grace deeply, but lack of communication about his feelings contributed to the tension within his household. Kindness should never be taken for granted. Grace's kindness towards Margaret and her children was exemplary, yet it was met with betrayal. This reminds us to take the goodwill of others for granted. Not to take the goodwill of others for granted. The truth always prevails. No matter what you do in life, truth will always prevail. No matter how much one tries to hide their wrongdoings, the truth will eventually come to light. Margaret's confession showed that justice cannot be escaped. Community strength is vital. The role of the community in uncovering the truth and ensuring justice highlights the importance of unity and vigilance in the society. Remember, actions have consequences. Every action, whether good or bad, has repercussions. Margaret's crime led to her imprisonment, and Richard's trust in her turned into regret. Value every moment with loved ones. Grace's untimely death served as a reminder to cherish the people we love, not let circumstances hinder our appreciation of them. Justice is necessary for healing. The community's decision to hold Margaret accountable brought a sense of closure to Grace's tragic loss, teaching that justice is an essential part of reconciliation. Kindness and legacy lives on. Grace's legacy of kindness and love continued to inspire Richard and the community. Our good deeds outlived us and leave a mark on the world. Lastly, you see, jealousy and greed only lead to isolation. Margaret's jealousy not only destroyed her relationships but left her completely isolated, showing that greed and envy are self-destructive. This story reminds us to act with kindness, honesty, and humility in our relationships and communities. Hello my besties, I know you all enjoyed this story. This is Storytime with Somi. This is a true life story, but I brought it so that people can learn from it. Jealousy. Don't allow your jealousy consume you into harming others or thinking any selfish thing against your neighbor. I love you all. Kindly like, comment, share this amazing story so that YouTube and the algorithm of this story will go viral. I love you all. Stay tuned till we drop another amazing story by Storytime with Somi. Bye.